and thank you for joining me for experiment 3.1. Can you guys believe that we're already in module 3? This year is flying by. Today we're going to do module 3.1, and it is a floating egg, question mark. So let's see if this actually floats. So today we're going to use part of our experiment. We're going to have a tall glass. We're going to have just some regular salt. I have pre-measured 1.5 cups of water, and it's all in here. I have 1 egg that has not been refrigerated. This just came from one of our hens today, so it's pretty darn fresh. And then I have a teaspoon and a spoon that we'll use to mix in the salt. So we're actually going to do this is a multi-step process. And of course, safety glasses, you know, because who knows, something could happen, and we want to make sure that we're safe. So what we're going to start with is we're going to take this 1.5 cups of water, and we're going to pour it into the glass, like so. Okay, just so you can see, here's the fill line for 1.5 cups of water. Then we're going to go ahead and just simply place this egg into the water, and we're just gently going to place it in and hope it doesn't break. So we'll just drop it. And as you can see, that pretty rapidly dropped to the bottom. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and pause here and draw this and label it inside of your notebook. We're going to continue, and now we're going to carefully get the egg out, and we really want to make sure that we're getting as close to 1.5 cups. So what we don't want to do is scoop this out and drop a bunch of water inside of the cup or on the counter for 2 reasons. We don't want to make a huge mess because nobody needs that. And then the other thing is we don't want this water amount, the actual amount of water, because we measured it at 1.5 cups, we don't want that actual amount to become a variable. The only variable that we have right now is the water density and then adding salt and watching to see if the egg floats. So if we use the scientific method that we learned in experiment 2, I want you to think about what was step 1? What did we just do? What was our observation? What did we notice? And then I'm going to ask you again, what is your idea? What was your thought? Because the title of this is a floating egg. Do eggs float? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. So what we want to see is this variable of the amount of water. We want to reduce it as much or as little as possible. So our next step is going to be putting in 1 teaspoon. Now, this could also be a variable actually, because if you can notice in my little teacup or in my little teaspoon here, if I put in this amount and stirred it in, or if I put in this amount, it's hard for you to see, but that is a heaping spoonful of salt or teaspoon of salt. You don't want to do that. We want to get everything as close as we possibly can. So I'm actually going to take this spoon, this end of the spoon, and we're going to kind of scoop it out of the salt bin, level it off as best we can, and go ahead and simply drop it in the water. If I drop it from this height, if I drop it from here, that's not a variable. It's not going to make a difference in this experiment, so that really doesn't matter. I'm going to take my trusty spoon and mix this until it dissolves. So you all can talk amongst yourselves right now, and we're going to wait until this actually dissolves, which could be a few seconds. So right now is a great time for you to write in your notebook, label what we just did. We added 1 teaspoon of salt, and it's still about the same amount. It's fair to say 1.5 teaspoons. We're not doing this for NASA or something like that, so I think being at 1.5 is perfectly fine. And we're gonna put that down nice and neat. That is, for all intents and purposes, dissolved. There's no chunks of salt floating around. So I'm gonna repeat this step. I'm gonna take the egg, gently put it into the glass. Before I do that, what step am I doing right now? I want you to decide what that step is. Okay, write it down. All of these things, take from what you learned last module and put it into this module so you can learn to use the scientific process or the scientific method more and use the words that they taught you in that last, module. So I'm going to gently put the egg in. We really don't want the egg to crack, so that's why I'm gently putting it in there. Well, so the egg is actually still touching the bottom. I don't see a significant change. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. Remember to top off as much water as you can. Top off the egg and put both down. I'm going to go ahead and get one more, a teaspoon of salt. And we want to take this variable out. So instead of doing like a tiny bit or a huge amount, we're going to scoop it up. We're going to level it off with the bottom part of the spoon. Top that off. Go ahead and dump it into the water and stir away. So right now, as we're stirring, I want you to think about, if you need to catch up on your notebook, do that. But my thing that I'd like to ask you is, I wonder if the temperature of the water makes a difference. It might. I actually used cold water. I had to look at my sink. I used cold water. So I don't know if warm water makes a difference. Might be worth trying out. Put this down. I'm going to take this egg. I'm going to gently put it into the water. This looks like it's still touching the bottom. Like there is nothing about this that there's nothing floating. It's still perfectly touching the bottom. So we're going to take this out. Tap it out gently. Put the egg down gently. We're going to add number 3. We're going to go through the steps a little bit faster this time. Take it off, dump it in. Use this to stir all the salt in. So this is our 3rd teaspoon of salt that we're adding in. And we're going to get this all stirred up. Looking all pretty. Get it all done here. I think we're good. Tap it out. Gonna take the same egg, drop it in, see what happens. The egg is still going to the bottom and it is still touching the bottom. Okay, so I want you to see that. The egg is still touching the bottom. The only thing, and I don't know if you can see this, so I want to tell you this, is it appeared like the egg had some more resistance on the way down. So if you could rewind that and watch it, that would be great. That's just what I'm observing. And it's a little different because I can see it a little better than you can. So what number are we on now? This is number 4. As we add this, and as I'm stirring this to get it dissolved, I'm going to ask you a question. Are you noticing anything different about the water? Just curious if you notice anything. Maybe make a prediction about that. I'm not sure if you can see. I know I can see a huge difference. I'm not sure if you can, but I'd love to hear what you think and if you can see it. Going to continue stirring this until it's all stirred up. We're looking good. Put the egg in. This egg is still technically touching the bottom. It went down a lot slower, but then if I look at this right now, there's a smaller portion of the actual egg touching the bottom. It's not completely touching the bottom like it has been. And we're at 4 teaspoons. So let's try this again. The great thing about science is that you don't want to discard or kind of poo-poo any ideas or any part of the experiment, because that's how you learn. So what we're learning right now is that, I need to remeasure that. What you're learning right now is that this egg is going to take some significant amount of water to get any difference, because we're at 4 teaspoons of water in only 1.5 cups. So you can only imagine, I know that you all have read the science, module 3, and it talks about the Great Salt Lake. So if you can only imagine if this egg, this fairly insignificant egg, is taking now 5 teaspoons of water, or 5 teaspoons of salt in the water mixed up, and it still isn't floating, how much salt must be in the Great Lakes, in the Great Salt Lake? How much water do you think, or how much salt do you think is in there? And we're gonna go ahead and put this down. Take our egg and gently put it in. Okay. It is barely touching the bottom right now. It is still touching, but it's not touching by much. Okay. So we're gonna do 1 more teaspoon. And after this, what I would say is if you wanna know if it would take more, measure it. Measure it and see if it would take more, or how much it takes to get it to float to the very top. That would be exciting. Well, I think it would be exciting. Go ahead and measure that off. Let's put this in the water. This is our 6th and final one. So, sorry. I don't like touching it. I like touching pretty things. So I'm gonna go like this, put this in here, and go ahead and just stir it. And let's see what happens. The other thing that I would say is if you wanted to do this experiment, there's a lot of great variables that we could kind of choose. So I had said warm or cold water. I used cold. It'd be interesting to try warm. Another thing that might be interesting is, so this is a fresh egg. This is a relatively fresh egg. It has been out on the counter. I literally took it from my hen house today at about noon. And so it's never really been cold. So it'd be interesting to see what would happen if you had an egg that was refrigerated or one that has been out for a week, you know, out on the counter. Lots of variables here. So we're gonna drop this in 1 more time. Oh, it is barely touching. I don't know if you guys can see this. It is barely touching the bottom there. So I want you to extrapolate or pull out what you think would happen if we kept adding 1 teaspoon at a time. Remember, you are more than welcome to do these experiments independently, and I would love to hear your outcome. So this is a total of 6 teaspoons. 1 egg that has been on the counter for about 6.5 hours, and then cold water. If you choose to do this experiment yourself, let me know. I would love to hear how it turned out. I'm just saying maybe extra credits involved, I don't know. But I need to know that you did it by doing the scientific method, okay? So is your hypothesis the same as your theory at the end, okay? Thank you so much. And of course, oh, I can't forget this. Before we end anything, do you guys remember what we always have to do? You always have to clean up after yourself because that's not for anyone else. That's for you to do. So we're gonna go ahead and put the lid back on the salt. Put this aside because that's gonna go in the pantry. And then I'll pour all of this out, put these in the dishwasher, put everything away, and wipe up the counter. Because who wants to clean up after a science experiment if you did it and they didn't do it? Anyway, so you guys tell me, I would love to hear if you did it. I would also love to hear if your hypothesis matched what you saw. Because this is not a failed science experiment. The question was a floating egg. So does it happen? If it didn't happen, it doesn't mean that we did anything wrong. It means that there's variables that we can change to change the outcome. And that's why, as in the last experiment, or excuse me, in the last module, that we really learned that science isn't 100%. Because things can be disproven. We can also use the scientific method, and you might get something different than I get. And that's okay, because that's science. So enjoy the differences, revel in that, knowing that nothing is perfect and that God's got it all in control.